Namaste, Jai Hind, everyone. Welcome to this session of Indic Talk. This is another session on one of the most enigmatic, if you can say, personality in the history of freedom movement. Someone who had been a pioneer of many events in the freedom struggle, but we hardly know much about him. We are talking about Sri Rash Behari Bose. And today, to discuss about him, we have with us the author of the latest book on Sri Rash Behari Bose, A Samurai Dream of Azad Hind, Rash Behari Bose. So this is the latest book. And the author, Prasun, is with us today. We welcome him on behalf of the entire team. Shri Prasun Roy is a best-selling author by passion and writes different genres of non-fiction, including biography, translations, history, mythology, in varied genres of fiction, including young adults, mystery, paranormal, and thrill. Prasun lives with his family in Kolkata and hails from West Bengal. So, without taking much time, I hand it over to you, sir, and also would like to wish to ask that what led you to write about this subject, and perhaps this is your first book in history, somebody on an
Yes.
icon from the freedom struggle.
Okay. So thank you so much. And yes, this book, my book, A Samurai Dream of Azad Hind, it's a biography of Sri Rash Behari Bose. But I would also say that it is a tribute to many of the unsung heroes who had fought in the freedom struggle of this country. But unfortunately, most of their names are either forgotten or lost in the pages of unwritten history. So this book is one small endeavor to write about them, to talk about them, so that today when we are celebrating 75 years of independence, the Amrit Mahotsav, on that occasion, at least we should remember the contributions that these people had. Coming to the name, and before that, the question that you asked, that why did I choose to write about Sri Rash Behari Bose? Now, Rash Behari Bose is the name of a fighter. He was not just any fighter for freedom struggle of this country. He was also a man who, actually took the struggle of Indian independence from the local national level to the world arena. So he was one of those who had created the forum where the world during the World War II actually gave that importance to India. And then he was the one to organize and give us a proper organized army which could fight for the revolution of this country and to get us our freedom. So it was no ordinary contribution that he had. And because of his works throughout his life, he was self-exiled in Japan for half of his life. He could never come back to India after he had to go away post Gadar conspiracy failure. But he stayed in Japan, lived there like a fugitive. There were five kidnapping attempts on him, even after he got ammunition in Japan. So till then, and till his last breath, he was fighting for the struggle of India's independence. And that is where his contribution is not small. He had done a huge job in this particular freedom that we enjoy today in this country. And that is why I think his name needs to be known by many of us. It is, Ritul, it's pretty unfortunate that there is a street in Kolkata which is called the Rash Behari Avenue. But unfortunately, many of us don't know that Rash Behari Avenue is not named after Sri Rash Behari Bose also. It's named after Sri Rash Behari Ghosh. So a man of his stature who had done so much for what we enjoy today is fairly forgotten. So I thought of writing about him, and thank you so much for all the love that the book has received. It's a small piece of my contribution. There are so much that can be written on the works of these men. And the book is named A Samurai Dream of Azad Hind. During my book launch, we had said that the book was initially named The Other Bose. We had given this name to the manuscript when it was not yet published. Then, deliberately, with my publisher, my editor, and I, we all sat together and we decided that we will name it something else, because the other Bose brings Rash Behari Bose in conflict to the name of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, which is not a truth. The two were working in unison. They were working in harmony, giving it a shadow of the enigmatic personality of Subhash Chandra Bose makes the two personalities get intermixed and creates a confusion. So that is why we named it A Samurai Dream of Azad Hind. Then why samurai? A samurai in Japan is a fighter who fights for a certain faith and a belief. And similarly, Rash Behari Bose, right from the age of 10 years, I would say, if you read the book, right from the age of 10 years, he wanted to fight for his motherland. So that was a belief and a faith which he carried on till he passed away, till his last breath. So that is something which I thought that I would tell everyone about the book. Please do read it. And yes, if you want to know something else also, I am definitely here to discuss.
Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction to the book you just shared with us. And even I'm just looking forward to read it. And I think all of us must uh, at least read it, and that would be a tribute. Our quest of knowing him is also a tribute in this direction. And I congratulate you for writing this very important book. I
Thank
remember some of reading some of the older works on Sri Rash Behari Bose, which are not known to many of the readers outside of Bengal. Like
Yes.
the one book written, you must be knowing the one book written by Uma Mukherjee and Haridas Mukherjee. So I don't think that people outside Bengal quite know about this book.
Yes, that book is also out of print.
Yes,
There are
yes,
only a very few copies available. One copy is there at the National Library,
yes,
and there are very few prints. So it's also a pertinent point, Ritul. Actually, books on these men whose contributions are not so small had been written earlier during the 1950s and the 1960s, but
yes,
in
yes,
today's
yes,
context, and those were also historical books, and
yes.
they were works of great research. But in today's context, the people who are reading books now, they don't get to find those copies also. And
Very
that
true.
is how the knowledge is getting completely lost. That history, which is so very integral to our, own existence, who we are and how we are, that question is getting answered through those books are not there. So we should try to write something about these people and their contributions, definitely.
I think I'll just highlight upon this dilemma by sharing just one example. When youngsters like us go to bookshops, uh,
Mhm.
I'm talking about the time even before Chandrachudha wrote about Netaji, and before the time Anuj Das and Chandrachuda's book on his death mystery, The Conundrum came.
Yes.
So when youngsters like us visit bookshops and we inquire about books on freedom movement, so the
Mhm.
shelf has nothing about these great men. Not a
Very true.
single book about Baba Jyotin, not a single book about Netaji, something that truly signifies the contribution he had in our freedom movement. So there are so
Exactly.
many patriots, so many freedom fighters who did tremendous for achieving independence. But books like these are very rare. But I'm happy now the things are changing, and we are having authors like you amongst us who are writing on this subject.
Yes, and when you read about the way Rajbehari Bose and many others like him they went on to do whatever they wanted, the story is itself so enigmatic. For example, if you look into the life of Sri Rash Behari Bose, he was born, his mother passed away when he was 3 years old, and he was taken to Chandor. And there he used to listen to stories of the 1857 Shipai Bidroh and all. And that time, this sentiment of doing something for his country germinated in his heart when he was hardly 7, 8 years old. And by the time he was 10 years old, and he was slowly moving from Shubaldaw to Chandanagar with his father, where his father used to work at the press. That time he was like totally restless. So his initial life was that of a restless person who wanted to do something, but he was not being able to do something concrete. So when he went to Chandanagar, there he met so many youngsters like him. One of them was like his best friends over there, and they kind of became, a part of his complete journey. And that is how his struggle was so very unique, in doing everything that he did.
Yes, yes. Even it's such a delight discussing about such heroes. It gives us goosebumps to this date. So I had some questions in my mind, if I may just proceed with them. I was reading this book, The Two Great Revolutionaries,
Mhm.
by Uma Mukherjee, about which I just mentioned some time back.
Right,
So
right.
Ash, the author writes about Sri Rash Behari Ji Bose and begins to, introduce him.
Mhm.
So, our author has written that if Aurobindo Ghosh is regarded as the Mazzini of young India, Rash
Mhm.
Behari Bose may be fittingly called the Cavour of India's freedom movement. So that's the way the author is kind of trying to uh, put down the significance that Shri Rash Behari Ji Bose had on Indian freedom movement. But generally, as we hear about him today, he's generally considered as any other freedom fighter from belonging to Bengal specifically, and people may not know about his contribution to the freedom movement. So, if you have to put him on the historical timeline and on the historical scene, how would you describe him? If you could share some of the instances that shaped his
Sure.
life and how he contributed to the movement in a larger
Absolutely.
way.
Absolutely. So, Rash Behari Bose was not just somebody who was working only out of Bengal. That is also something which is very unique about him. And it was shaped by the way fate drew the picture of his early life till he was in his 20s. So, initially, Rash Behari Bose, when he was in Chandanagar, he was with his friends like Shirish Chandra Ghosh, whom I was just referring to. Shirish Ghosh is a man who had been throughout with Sri Rash Behari Bose in this struggle for our freedom. But unfortunately, many of people of Bengal don't even remember him, or we don't even have a proper photograph of this man. And but he was such a great supporter of Sri Rash Behari Bose. And right from Chandanagar, when he was in school, he had conflicts with British teachers who used to come and abuse the local native students. And from that time, his restless journey, which I was referring to, his father tried to protect him. His father sent him to Kolkata from Chandanagar so that he could come and study in the modern school, which was right there. But still, he was not able to focus. And that time, Unushnaal Somiti was getting formed. So all those influences were coming in. There was Bagha Jotin, who was a great leader. There's an instance when an author had written that if Bagha Jotin could do what he was planning to do, then he would have been the father of the nation, and nobody would have known of Sri Mahatma Gandhi, because he was not even in India that time. So then Rajbihari Again, after coming to Kolkata, he was, restless. So his father took him to Fort Williams for a job. And even in Fort Williams, he had a, rife with one of the British officers. From there, his father tried to save his face and take him and sent him to the Shimla press. At Shimla, he was totally away from Bengal. So it's a cultural shift for him. In Shimla, there in the Shimla press, there were two groups. One which was the pro-British rulers, another which was against the British rulers, but were still employees of the Shimla press. There, Rash Behari joined the second group. There, his father received complaints about him. So he sent him to Kasoli, to the Pasteur Institute, which was completely in the, totally away from humanity, I would also say at that time. It was like totally up in the hills. But after the partition of Bengal, he again ran back home to Chandanagar. From there, his father saw that I can't hold this person back. And he sent him to Dehradun. In Dehradun, he was at the Tagore Villa estate, which belonged to Pramindranath Thakur, his estate over there. And he was a home tutor and he was working at the Forest Research Institute as a clerk in the chemistry department under a person called Sardar Puran Singh, who was the head of the chemistry department. Over there, he learned mixing chemicals and how to make explosives. So you have to understand that this man is moving across the country at that time when there was no electronic communication so good, there was no internet, no telephone, meeting these people all across the nation made him understand those cultures, helped him to make friends in those different parts of the country where people were so different from each other. A man who belonged to Banaras was very different from a person's perspective in Bengal. But his fate actually took him to this whole area where he could make communications with everyone. And then in 1912, when he, or 1112, around that time frame, he got to meet Bagha through one of his associates, Amarendranath Chatterjee, who was again in Dehradun, and he was a very close person of Rash Behari. So the meeting with Bagha or Jyotirindra Mukherjee helped him to be a part of that larger vision to free India through an armed revolution during the World War I. And the plan was in the World War I, when the British soldiers would be away from this country, most of them, and only the native soldiers would be there. At that time, people would be able to overthrow the rulers who would be there in lesser numbers. And that is how he was a part of this major plan, which is retaliate with the style of 1857 revolution, fight with arms and overthrow our rulers. So it was not a small thing. And Rash Behari Bose was made the man to do the entire connection right from Punjab till Bengal. He was the man who was the thread. In Banaras, he had a code name called Bengali Babu. When they, or a Fat Babu or Mota Babu, as a type, he had a name. And when he was going to Amritsar to make the bombs out of, cigarette cans or, ink pots. So those were procured and he was making them somewhere in Punjab, in Amritsar. So, he was the whole connecting point in this whole conspiracy. That it was not a conspiracy, it was a revolution, I would say. Because unfortunately, in our history books and many places on the internet, these incidents are named as conspiracies. These are not conspiracies, they are revolutions. And had these men not been betrayed by traitors, our history would have been very, very different. So I think I could touch upon some points which you have asked me.
Yes, yes. As you just pointed out, there are so many terminologies in history that are so wrong when it
Yes.
comes to defining the movements and also the freedom fighters. Like the way
Yes.
we describe them as extremists. So this is
Yes.
such a wrong term. along
there
with,
is a book,
yeah,
Ritul, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
no, no,
which
no,
is
please,
called
please go ahead.
Terrorism in Bengal, written by Sri Eke Shamanto. I still regret, why do we call our own heroes as terrorists? Why do we call it as terrorism in Bengal? It should be named as revolution in Bengal.
Very true, very true. So that's the point you raised very well. Um, this brings me to my next question. Actually, two such questions. Can you
Mhm.
please tell us something about the movement you mentioned, which happened in 1915, and Bagha Jotin was one of the key figures of that movement, and what they actually planned and what was the agenda? Because when we read the plain history available in traditional textbook, the
Right.
only main event that they hint towards, which happened in 1915, is just about the entry of Mahatma Gandhi into the political scene. So when you talk
Very
about
true.
1915, only that comes into the mind of general readers. So that
Yes.
is why I want you to highlight upon what happened in 1915, because Indians now need to know about that.
Very true. I completely agree with you, Ritul. This thing began pretty early. Like there is one personality, which is Jotindranath Mukherjee, who was a man inspired from Swami Vivekananda. Rash Behari Bose was a man who was inspired by the words of Rishi Aurobindo. And they had only one thing in mind, which is to lead the country to its freedom. And to do that, you have to lose the fear of death. And that can only be achieved through spiritual development. So, spiritualism is something which they needed to practice in order to devote themselves completely to this movement. And Bahajuddin had actually been planning to do something, revolutionary right from 1912, when he had met the German prince and he had got a promise of, importing arms from Germany. And his part of the plan was to procure arms through the German help and get into something called a Christmas Day plot. And the Christmas Day plots were supposed to strike Bengal, Andamans, and to capture the Fort William areas, so that Bengal would be totally out of the British control, and then make Bengal as a base to attack the rest of the country and thwart away the British. So that was his plan. And Rash Behari Bose was a man who was, I was telling you, he was very restless. And in 1912, early that time, there was one person, he was the subdivisional officer of Sylhet, and his name was G. Gordon. He had attacked an ashram called the Jagatsi ashram over there, and he had actually killed Mahendranath Dey. If you see the national archives of our Indian archives, which are there online also, you would be able to find all those police files which I had referred during writing this book. And when that attack happened, it created ripples across all the minds of the revolutionaries. And Rash Behari was one of them. And he was visiting Chandonnagor in 1912 when his mother was about to met Motilal Roy. He met his friend Shirish Ghosh, and they all thought of doing something to take some action. And after his mother passed away, he went back to Dehradun, then came back again to Chandonnagor with one plan, and that was to strike the British when they were doing a very, very significant thing. And that significant thing was shifting the capital from Bengal to Delhi. That time, Rash Behari Bose planned with his friends. He got hold of a person called Basanto Vishwas, who was a young boy, and they attacked the viceroy directly when the procession was moving through Chandni Chowk, and they bombed the viceroy. Unfortunately, that event didn't result in the death of the viceroy, but Rash Behari was a man who was always a master of disguise, and he disguised himself, and he could go back to Dehradun immediately, and he was waiting in Dehradun when the viceroy actually went to Dehradun to recover from his wounds, Rash Behari, had put up such an image of himself that he was invited to the circuit house as one of the, pro-British men who belonged to Dehradun. So he was always trying to do something so that his mission doesn't get lost. And then, if you look at 1915, some very interesting and important events happened in history, like you were telling. One was the World War. Second, there was a large population of North Indians, specifically from the Punjab provinces, who used to go to Canada, to the US for work opportunities. And that time, the Canadian law, with the influence of the British, they started to do these racial discriminations over there. And a ship called the Komagata Maru was there in Canada, Vancouver, and the entire ship was stranded for 3 months with all these people on board who had traveled right from here to Canada. They were not let in. Out of the entire ship, I think only 5 people were let in, and they were humiliated. And finally, when these people started to revolt, the newspapers reflected that this ship is full of revolutionaries, so send it back. So from Canada, the ship was sent back to Bengal, to the Bajbaj port. And at the Bajbaj, the people of the British soldiers were waiting with guns to shoot at them. And there's a Komagata Maru monument over there also right now. If you visit the port, you can see it. But that was an unfortunate event which created revolutionary impacts to the people of our country who were there in the US. And mostly that created a surge to the Gadar movement. The Gadar movement was already underway to protest against the discriminations that were happening, against the Indian students and the Indian people who were working in the US and the Canada. But the Komagatu incident actually ignited it into an explosion. And that time, people like Vishnu Ganesh Pingle, they just Hardayal Singh, they just decided that let's do something drastic. And in October 1914, they were all back to India, and most of them. And another important thing is like Bagha Jotin was a man who always believed in creating what I would say, like it's like undisconnected small units across the entire world, I would say, so that if one unit get caught, nobody would be able to find its connection to somebody else. So that was his plan. So it's a disconnected way of attacking. All these units were together, but nobody would be able to find a connection between these two institutes. So many students of his were studying in Germany, in the US. One of such of them was Shutin Sen. And Shutin Sen directed Vishnu Pingle to come to India and meet Bagha Jotin. So he came to Kolkata, he met Bagha Jotin, and Bagha Jotin said that there is one man who can help you, because the Gadar party members who were there in India at that time, they were doing small attacks, small bomb attacks, small gun attacks, but that was not leading to anything. They were not being able to create an organized revolution. So when they met Bagha Jotin said that, see, there is one man who can do this for you, and you can meet him in Banaras. Go and meet him. He's Rash Behari Bose. So Vishnu Pingle went to Banaras, met Rash Behari. With him was Shochindranath Charnal, who was his lifelong companion, a man who had fought for him, who had been impoverished, been in the jail for years, but never gave up. So Rash Behari agreed, and through Vishnu Pingle, Sachindranath Sanyal, and there were many, Moola Singh, Pritam Singh, Puran Singh, they were all there in the Punjab area. So he coordinated with them. He coordinated with the Lahore unit. He coordinated with the Dhaka unit. And a complete plan was made. And the plan was like, the revolution would begin from the north, and the unit right down in the east would wait for a signal, which is on that same day of the attack. If the following day the Amritsar mail doesn't arrive, that means something has happened over there. They won't be doing any telephone calls, nothing, because they would be disrupting the phone lines and the cable lines. So no communication. If the newspaper doesn't arrive through train, that means the revolution has happened. So they will start their attack. So it was a complete plan. And you won't believe this man was actually able to convince 26 regiments of the British Indian Army to join hands. He tried it earlier in 1913, but that time nobody said that we will join. Like the Fort Williams, the 10th Regiment over here, they disagreed to do that. And because the soldiers were patriotic, but they said that there is nowhere we would be able to fight these people. But in 1915, when the World War was on way, that time everyone, all the 26 regiments agreed to be a part of this uprising. So that is how I think 1915 played a very, very significant role. It's unfortunate that because of traitors, that conspiracy or that uprising failed. See, even my mouth says conspiracy because we had been taught that these are conspiracies right from the
Yes. Yeah.
childhood. So that
That's the
failed during
most
that time, and
unfortunate part. Yeah.
unfortunately we lost. Yes, and even Bagha Jotin had to become a martyr. Otherwise, history would have been very different.
What happened in 1915, I think exactly Rash Behari Ji Bose tried to recreate that during the World War II. So he was constantly at it, we must say.
Yes, actually, Rash Behari Bose, when 1915 failed, he didn't have anywhere to go, because he knew that everyone knew that he would get caught, because the British had by now understood that this is the most dangerous man. It was, Taggart had labeled him that the most dangerous man in the revolutionary area right now is Rash Behari Bose. And that time he didn't have anywhere to run, because wherever he would go, even his Dehradun hideouts were completely captured at that time. So he couldn't go over there. There were arrests happening in hundreds, and they were being just killed like cats and dogs. So he had to run away. He landed in Japan with the knowledge of just four Japanese words. And as soon as he landed in Japan, he wanted his next destination that he had planned was to go to Shanghai. And he could, even in that land where he doesn't have any contact, he only knew 2 3 people over there. One of them was Bhagwan Singh Gyani, whom he met. He was able to convince the German foreign office over there to give him somebody with whom he would go to Shanghai and arrange for small consignments of arms to be sent. He even sent one consignment in which Abanindranath was a man who was his man who was carrying the arms and some letters, but unfortunately that also got intercepted. So he planned to go over there and send these small consignments, because earlier the Germans had tried to send large consignments of arms, shiploads, but those were intercepted by the British. Now he said, don't do that. Take these in smaller boats. And my men would be there, Amurendra would be there, Swachindranath would be there. They would take them at different ports, and you can, smuggle the arms over there. But that plan also failed, and he had to return back to Tokyo. And when he returned back, and even before he was going, he had told Motilal Roy that to take this particular revolution forward, to get freedom through a revolutionary approach, we need money, we need arms, we need training. We just cannot do it in this manner. And that was the 3 driving factors which he had actually utilized when he saw the opportunity of the World War coming up in the year. He had forecasted it in 1939, 1940 only, that this war is going to happen. He had written to Sachindranath Shanal also. His grandson has these, the letters which he had put up on Twitter also. You can read them, and you'd be able to see that this man was, well aware that such a conflict would happen, and he was working towards it. So that is what his vision was, as a revolutionary.
Yes. Another wrong impression that we get while reading the traditional textbooks is that every revolution across the different corners of India were happening in some kind of an isolation. So revolutionaries in Punjab were operating amongst themselves, and those in Bengal were operating amongst themselves. So the connect and the network about which you just discussed is something that general history textbooks don't speak about.
Yes,
I was
yes.
I was reading the book by great revolutionary Surendranath Sanyal, Bondijibo. In that, he
Mhm.
wrote about the historical amalgamation of all these groups from Punjab to UP to Dhaka coming
Yes.
together during 1913 to 15, and they were all operating in a loop. So that is something very fascinating to know as we read history.
Yes, yes. And even Bhaga Jyotin had created, he had created these Bayam Somitis, these Anushilan Somiti units, which used to work for flood relief work in Banaras or in Bengal during the Bengal floods of 1907. Those were all small units which were helping in cremating the dead, or in helping the people whose houses have been, flooded and they were stranded completely. But in the ideological context, these were disconnected units which were all working together towards that peak to achieve independence. So they were all connected, but nobody would get a hint of one if the other gets caught. That was
Yes.
the main difference between what Badendra Ghosh did and what Bagha Jotin or Rash Behari did. So Badendra's Alipur bomb case got caught because he was the main face of that thing. But these people were faceless, and they were like working all together.
Yes, of course. Also, in keeping the revolution alive in Punjab during those times, Rash Behari Ji Bose played a very significant role.
Yes.
So, if you could highlight upon his activities in the region of Punjab, so that
Okay.
people know that there was a connection that existed between him and the revolutionaries, like the father of great revolutionary Bhagat Singh. So, we don't
Mhm.
know things like these.
So, Rash Behari Bose had actually got a ring, which he used to call the, I think it's called the Gadar Anguthi. So that he had given to, I believe he gave it to Sachindranath Sanyal, and that finally went to Bhagat Singh. And Bhagat Singh used to carry it as a source of inspiration for his, whatever he did later on. And the Punjab context comes into play right from the Gadar movement. And when the Gadar movement started, the people of Punjab, like Lala Hardyal, who was an Oxford educated Sikh, but he had to run away to France on the context of getting caught. Lala Rajpat Rai had actually suggested him to go, and he became an editor of the Vande Mataram magazine over there. And then from there, from Paris, he flew to Algeria, and then to the Martinique, and then to the US. And from the US, they tried to operate out of Punjab, where all these Gadar members were now back. And after, like I said, after the Komaga Tomorrow happened, the entire community was, seething to take revenge over there. And there were so many people who were ready to give their everything to fight for the freedom of this country. And at that time, when Pingle and Sachindranath Sanyal came, they went to visit Amritsar, and over there there was an incident. If you read the book, it's on the Virpali Dharamshala on 31st of December, that they had a meeting. And then at the Sant Gulab Singh Dharamshala, which is also in Amritsar, these people actually displayed the bombs which Rash Behari Bose had made for this particular revolution to happen. And everyone was overwhelmed by the audacity of this Bengali Babu. and they even gave 500 rupees on January 1915 to procure things and ammunitions to make these bombs. So the bombs were getting manufactured in Punjab and they were getting distributed across the country from through Lahore, through Amritsar to Punjab and down till Bengal. So the entire connection was there. And these were the people who actually started, implanting the ideology of Rash Behari Bose into the regiments. And Rash Behari himself went and met the regiments also, where the soldiers were also from Punjab, over there in the north, in the northern provinces, and then here in the Fort Williams, and if you go to the Dhaka, that portion. So everywhere, the whole ideology got spread, and when the conspiracy failed through a traitor called Kirpal Singh, these people sacrificed their lives. They were hanged or they were, made to stand in front of the gun squads. And that thing percolated into the sentiments of the community. And that is how, the later generations, like the generations of Bhagat Singh and all, they were inspired by the works that these people had done to carry forward that legacy. So he definitely played a really significant role to unite that sentiment, that nationalistic sentiment.
And also, along with the legacy he had and the inspiration he delivered to the young batch of revolutionaries, people like him also laid down networks of communication and networks between revolutionaries that eventually helped uh, freedom fighters like Netaji during the World War II, if I'm right.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So, India
Yes,
House in
I was
London
also,
was,
yeah, if I can just add one more question to this so that you
sure,
can take them both together.
sure, sure.
So, as you said, Rash Behari Ji Bose already could envisage World War II happening, and he was also keeping a close watch on the political events happening in India. So,
Mhm.
what was the connection between him and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and what role Savarkar played into that? So, if you can just take that also as you were explaining something.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Veer Savarkar he was a proponent of militarization. So he always had this vision that we should join the armed forces of the British to learn from them and then attack them back with their same knowledge. And even Rash Behari Bose was a man, if you read my book, he had even dreamt a similar dream right from the age of 20. So he himself wanted to join the army. He tried with the British army, then he tried with the French army also. He had written, I think, about 5 applications at a young age to become a recruit in the army because he believed that only through proper military knowledge he or anybody can fight against their mighty opponent. So the ideological similarities made them really, really identical in their thoughts somewhere. Maybe their actions were different, but their thoughts somewhere united them really. And in like if you see Veer Savarkar, he was a part of the India House of London, and there was Lala Hardyal. Hardyal was also a part of the India House. And when these two people came down to their individual, like Savarkar got arrested and he was sent here to the jail. Hardyal had to run away and he had to flee to the US. So the connection was always there between them, either through covert, because most of these letters got intercepted. Even a letter of Sri Rajbehari which got intercepted, it's there in the foreword of my book, in which he had written to Subhash Chandra Bose that the Congress is now a evolutionary body. It should become a revolutionary body. Otherwise, we cannot do anything about our independence. So he was very clear about that. Even in the year 1938, when he had written to Shochindranath Sannal, he had written because communication was not very free flowing at that time. So he had specifically asked that why is the traditional Congress working against the works of Subhash Chandra Bose? And we as individuals who had been supporting revolution must support Subhash Bose. And that was in 1939. I said 38, so it's a rectification. So in 1938, he had also written again to Sachin Chandnal after he got out from prison in 1937. He had written a letter to him because he was that time financially broken, and he only had to write a few articles for newspapers where he used to get very less payment, so that he could survive financially. And if he's not able to survive financially, he cannot fight for his country. And that time, Rashbehari had written letters to him telling him that you go and meet either Birla, Mr. Birla, or you go and meet Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And you can also go and meet Savarkarji, because I'm going to write letters to these people so that they would help you rejoin the action that you had been into. So their connection was always there. And when the famous meeting between Netaji and Savarkarji happened in Bombay, that time, before that only, Rash Behari had written to Savarkarji to, ask Netaji to come and join hands with him, because after that meeting, Netaji had actually gone away to the Germany, and then through that submarine trip he went to Japan. So the communication channel was always there. Their communications through letters happened, but I think there are many other communications which happen through telephone calls. So those are not accounted for. You cannot get recorded evidences for them, but they did really happen, because Rash Behari Bose knew that he was creating a context during the Second World War, because he understood that it was the best opportunity when India could get freedom. In a letter he had also written in the year 1940s that, if the Congress is telling the rest of the country to oppose Japan and be pro-British, what will happen? We import 25 crores of goods from Japan, and Japan imports 35 to 40 crores from India. So if you oppose them, what will happen? Even our business would stop with them. So financially, it's also against the interest of the Indians who are making Indian goods, and we are giving it to somebody else. We are selling it to them. We are stopping the business opportunities also over there. And the agenda for the British was, they even tried to convince Japan to be their watchdog in Asia, which the Japanese kind of rejected during the World War. And then they started the conflict between the two. And if India supported the British and Japan is somehow winning the war, then India could never get its freedom, because Japan would always be against India if India supported the British cause. And why would they? Because the British was either they were trying to rule India through any means, be it through imperialism or be it through communism. So if imperialism fails, they will do it through communism, because the communism would be spread among the people, and their communist leaders of the British fraternity, they would come and start ruling us. So we don't have any escape from their hands. The only escape was complete freedom. And that could only happen through the war which Japan was leading of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. And that time, Rash Behari, during the Malay campaign, where all the prisoners of wars were captured during the fall of Singapore. And that time, he was the man who understood that, let us get this opportunity. Let me convince the Japanese to free these men, that can become into an Indian national army, an army which would have the recognition of a proper army. They are not, associates of the Japanese army. They are an independent army who has a status, and that army would fight side by side the Japanese. But when he did this, there were many incidents, like, when Mohan Singh was taken up by Fujiwara. Mohan Singh was one of the British Indian Army men who was taken up by Major Fujiwara to control the prisoners of wars. And he was becoming a small-time leader over there. So he was picked up to become the leader of the INA by Rash Behari Bose. But Mohan Singh did something so that he had to be taken out from the INA, and the INA was now leaderless. And this extensive travel across the country made Rash Behari Bose's health get deteriorated to a great extent. And he was a master strategist. He could organize these lakhs of men, but he knew his health would not allow him to go to war with a gun with the soldiers. And for that army, this country needs an enigmatic person who has a global aura. And who can that be other than Subhash Chandra Bose? And that is how he inducted Netaji into the Indian National Army, and they welcomed him with open arms, and the Azad Hind Fauj got formed. So it was all, a coordinated, beautiful picture that the two, three people of our freedom struggle had actually tried to draw.
Yes, yes. Also, as you just spoke about something called the Japanese innovation,
Mhm.
because when we read history, we know today that the support Japan rendered towards India's freedom movement has a tremendous role to play, without
Right.
which perhaps we couldn't be free by 1947. Perhaps the battle would have prolonged in some senses. So
True.
when we read history, it's so baffling to know that the support of Japan, which it rendered towards the freedom movement, was termed as something as Japanese invasion. So such a wrong term it was used, and the Congress party, it took
Mhm.
a stand that was so against the basic feeling that was amongst the revolutionaries, and
Yes.
you could describe it as completely standing against the national interest or blocking an effort that could bring India freedom. So we can only describe it that the party or the leaders, the topmost leadership, had no idea or clarity when it came to strategy or diplomacy.
Exactly, because Rajbihari Bose always, believed that some of the leaders were actually, not truly leading the country towards an independence movement. If you are becoming a dominion of the British, you are not free. His statement was very clear, just as Subhash Chandra Bose's statement was very clear, just as Veer Savarkar's statements was very clear, that it's either freedom or you are not free. There cannot be any intermediate in between the two. And Japan was leading an Asian ideology forward. So it's the prosperity of the Asian countries with Japan leading the way. That was the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. And the British were trying to dominate that ideology and make all of them their watchdogs across the entire world, so that they hold these small dominions like franchisee outlets of a particular restaurant. So that's how they were trying to make this thing whole spread. So when Japan said that no, we will not do it, we will have our own prosperity, that time India, we have to also know that India in itself was not strong enough financially or training wise to fight with the British completely during that time. Like our army is now one of the largest armies, but that time we were not. A part of the British army were being fed by our soldiers. Our men were dying in other countries for a cause which was not theirs. And Japan proved, when Singapore was taken, Japan proved that the Britain or the British forces are not invincible. They
Yes,
can
yes,
also be broken. So the fall of Singapore was something which created ripples across the Asian countries, and they all joined hands. And Rajbihari Bose was a brilliant strategist. He understood that this is the time, if we support these guys and if we are able to free our prisoners of wars, they will be an army which will be like an army of mercenaries who would go ahead and bring us our freedom. And that scared the hell out of the the British forces. So one of the reasons why we got our independence is not just the ideologies of non-violence. It's because of these consolidated effects, the fall of Imphal, and the people who were attacking on behalf of Subhash Chandra Bose's calls. These things created a fear in the imperial rulers also, that if this thing ever repeats, we would not be able to hold back. It would be a complete showdown. So yes, revolution, I believe, played a very, very significant part in getting us our freedom, and not just non-violence.
Yes. Also, I remember Rash Behari Bose gave this statement, Asia for Asians. So that was such a strategic thing to say at that point of time. And he was not
Yes,
just talking about India, he was talking about the entire Asia. So that is
yes,
just like a statesman would do.
yes. And he was a fugitive in Japan, and when after his marriage and all, when he was given the citizenship over there, he was one of the most respected men of the Japanese fraternity. When he passed away, the imperial coach was sent to take his mortal remains for cremation. He received so much respect amongst part of the world who are also very conservative like us, but they welcomed him and they embraced him, and they embraced Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose because of this whole friendship, whole beautiful relationship that he could create over there. And when the pointers, there were 42 pointer note after the Bangkok conference, which they handed over to the Japanese government, the wartime Prime Minister Tojo of Japan actually reverberated the words Asia for Asians and India for Indians in the Japanese imperial court also. And then they approved all the 42-point charter that they had for forming a proper INA and the Indian Independence League. And that is how it got initially created. So, he had that ideology to make himself known and make himself valuable to the Japanese society. Later, when Rabindranath Thakur once visited Japan, he came back and he told some of his people that if you go to Japan, go and meet Rash Behari Bose if you want to learn Japanese etiquettes. So that is what he created for himself and for the image of Indians in that country. And that is no ordinary deed, I would say. So he was there, he was his words made a difference in the Japanese political offices also. And he was very clever. He convinced them that when General Fujiwara was doing the FT Khan project in Bangkok, which was an intelligence network which would help Japan to gain all the knowledge of the movement of the Allied forces through that corridor, Rash Behari Bose joined hand with them and said that we will provide you with all those information because our soldiers and our men are there. We will support FK Khan, but you give us the INA. We wanted to make this army. You give us the arms. You give us the recognition. You give us the money and give us all these soldiers who are now POWs. Give them their freedom. We will give you the information and we will fight side by side with you. So that cannot be done if you don't have a strong political influence, and that too in a place like Japan at that point of time in history.
Yes. Also, we know that Shri Rashbihari Ji Bose was very much spiritually inclined since his childhood. He drew much of his inspiration from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, and the
Yes,
principles like Nishkam, Karma, and Atma Samarpan. These things kept him on moving towards his goal. So
yes,
today, when we speak about such leaders, we think that okay, they formed an army, so they must not be so much connected to their culture, their religion. So that's a myth,
Mhm.
even circulated, a misconception that is widely spread about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose also. So your
True.
comments on the same, because now we know that regarding some of the major issues, uh, all of these
Mhm.
great men, Savarkar, Netaji, and Rash Behari Bose, were on the same page. So
Yes.
an attempt to compartmentalize should would be completely wrong.
Yes. See, they were spiritually of that level, which I told you right during the beginning of this talk. For example, like the Bhagavad Gita is one, and secondly, when Rashbihari was meeting Motilal Roy in Chandanagar in the early 1911s, or when he was meeting Amarendranath Chatterjee, that time there were words of Rishi Aurobindo which said that submit yourself to God. Only when you submit yourself completely to God and you lose the fear of dying, then only can you become a true freedom fighter. And Rajbihari took an oath in 1912 in a closed room of Chandanagar that yes, I am submitting myself to that spiritual level so that I don't have to think about anything else. Even in his letters later down in 1938 to Sochina Shanal, his final words would be, we should be spiritually strong and believe in our spiritual being, in our spiritual existence. It's the spiritualism is beyond religion. Spiritualism is something which makes you very, very strong from within. And that is why he was the president of the Hindu Mahasabha from 1938 to 1940, which Veer Savarkar was leading from India. So, yes, ideologically wise, if you want to distort this information, like you said, that can be done. But why do that? Why not be proud of what our own ideologies are? These people were. They were completely open about it. So it is something which we should be proud about.
Yes. So there are attempts that happen all across the nation uh, to pit these great men against each other. So
Yes.
that is something very fascinating to know that they were so well connected and they were together fighting towards the same cause.
Yes, there are
Ye-
many statements by people who would say that Rash Behari Bose was, he created Azad Hind Fauj, Netaji took it from him, and all these, misstatements float around so much. But we need to know that without Netaji, Rash Behari wouldn't be able to do whatever he had dreamt to do. And without the strategies of Rashbihari Bose, perhaps the INA wouldn't have been formed, which later on Subhash Chandra Bose could take into as the Azad Hind Fauj. So they were all, united in their thoughts. And after his death, in one of his statements, Netaji had also written that if somebody can be called truly as the father of revolutionary thoughts of India outside the country, in the world, then that father would be Rash Behari Bose. So that was the respect they carried for each other. And when they first met in Japan, Rash Behari and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose looked at each other and there were only tears in their eyes because that was the sentiment which joined them. Nothing can be much more stronger. Nothing can be much more stronger.
Yes. And all of them were working as a grand team without
Yes,
thinking about any name or fame or who would be remembered in history as the leader of the movement or who would be come out as a champion out of the movement. So they did
yes,
not have these petty thoughts in their minds and they were
never.
just passing on the baton uh,
Yes,
to the other revolutionary. So that's
yes,
how it happened. You
absolutely.
beautifully named the book the Samurai Dream of Azad Hind. So,
Mhm.
how far do you believe that this samurai dream of Azad Hind was the dream that actually led the nation to achieving freedom? So, how far do you agree with me saying this thing?
I completely agree. Like I told you, there were so many people. who had been fighting for the freedom of our country. And all these men, they didn't even think once when they were joining hands to join these revolutions. So if you think 1915 onwards till the World War II, they were men who were dreaming only of one thing, and that was to get freedom for their country. They didn't earn fame, they didn't earn name. There were even statements in which many statesmen of our country had actually said that Rash Behari Bose had actually left this country after 1915, and he never came back. He didn't even bother to do anything for this country. But that is not true. Despite being away from a place which he loved so much, for which he was ready to fight to that level, that man could never even step back until he could never he died in Japan itself, and he couldn't even see India getting her freedom. So they didn't think even once that what the outcome would be. They were only thinking about the result, which is getting us our freedom. Even being away from the country, he was constantly giving radio speeches. He was writing in the Prabotak magazine. He was writing from 19 till 1923. Then, when the Prabotak got banned, he started to write in the Standard Bearer. But the Standard Bearer was again stopped after that. But still, he didn't stop. He continued to fight with all these men. And I'm saying he, but there are so many others over there, which you would find all their names in my book also. Like, how many people know about Amarendra Chatterjee, how he collected funds so that he could help Bahajuddin? How many people know about Shirish Chandra Ghosh? How many people know about Motilal Roy? But their contributions were so huge to get this dream fulfilled. And all these together act as a concoction which gave that idea to the British that we won't be able to hold back the reins of ruling this country for long. And now is the right time to quit. And that is why I think the samurai dream did get materialized, even though these men couldn't see it with their own eyes.
Yes. And it's the I think it's the high time that we bring this story of the samurai dream to the forefront. And I believe not only Sri Rash Behari Ji Bose, but starting from Vasudev Balwant Phadke to, I think, Veer Savarkar putting this idea into the Indian mind that we need to create a kind of insurgency in the British Indian Army, to
True.
Bagha Jotin, to Master Shujo Sen, when he set up his army against fighting
Yes.
the
Yes.
British. So
Yes.
all of them had the same dream, if we may say it in a way,
True.
up to Rash Behari Ji Bose finally passing on the baton to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So
Yes,
all these
and
great,
all these
yeah,
men, they were also doing this thing not as local insurgencies or tribal attacks. There are
yes,
many tribal leaders of this country who had fought also, but they were not able to take it into a larger level because they didn't have the means to reach out to the rest of the country. But these men, they were educated men who had the vision to reach there. Bahajuddin used to speak fluent English, which even the British, counterparts of his used to acknowledge at that time. And he was even sent on behalf of the government to Darjeeling to work over there for 3 years. So all these people, they had that vision that a small insurgency or uprising won't help us. We need to do it on a large scale. And that is how
yes,
they are different from many. But unfortunately, because of small traitors, like Kirpal Singh was one traitor who betrayed them in 1915. Otherwise, the Gadar uprising would have been a grand success. So
yes.
unfortunate, I would say, but these people should be remembered at least for whatever they did for us. Today, we are able to, live freely in this country with our heads high because of the sacrifices that they did.
Yes. And the most unfortunate part is that their actions today are viewed as some impractical things they were doing in isolation. So they were
Right.
getting together and doing some small things like some attacks which were actually called terror attacks. So such a wrong way of representing what they were actually planning. So they had a grand scheme of things in their minds, and they had a vision which was so big and
Yes.
which was eventually successful.
Right.
So it's really wrong to kind of
Yes. Yes. Even if you
stereotype these
read
actions. Yeah,
Bagajotin's work, it is labeled as the Hindu-German conspiracy.
yes,
It is not a conspiracy. It was, they had named it as a Christmas Day plot because they wanted to do the final attack on Christmas Day. And had it been successful, the whole of Bengal, the Fort William would have been in the hands of our Indian leaders. And from there, they would have shot in all directions to, thwart
yes,
away the British army from India. So that was a major plan. And we should definitely acknowledge and respect that courage, I would say.
definitely. And I think many things are happening in the positive direction, and I am just looking forward to 15th of August when the statue of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is inaugurated at Rajpath, and that would
Yes,
be a big day. And I think he would not only be standing for himself there, he would be representing all these revolutionaries who sacrificed their lives to achieve the same goal, the
yes,
60,000 soldiers of the Indian National Army, and
yes,
all the great men like Rash Behari Bose, Shoshindranath Sanyal, Veer Savarkar, and all of them. So I think that would
yes.
be a great, great day for our nation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because the enigma of their personality, we cannot put all of them together, but you can definitely, put somebody as an image, and you can Netaji's statue is getting inaugurated, but the vision that he had carried forward of all these men, that would get a true respect through that inauguration. I definitely believe that.
Yes, and I think that would be something like undoing of a great injustice that had been done to
Very
the
true.
legacy of these
Very true.
great men.
It's so unfortunate. Even Rash Behari Bose, like we discussed, had so many contributions. I think we would all agree together that he was not any ordinary person. He had done so much to bring independence to our country. But it's unfortunate that there is not even one medal which is named after him in our country, or any award which is named after him. Not even a proper statue of Sri Rash Behari Bose anywhere. So that is something which he truly deserves from us
Yes,
as countrymen. I'm not asking, and I'm not saying that give this, give that to his name, but whatever is a responsibility as an honest citizen, I think we should acknowledge it for him.
our leading.
Please
Yeah,
do read this book. It's an effort to bring light to, like I said, not just Sri Raj Bihari Bose, but to many of the unknown names who had done something which the contributions might look small, but they had done it with their whole life, and they had sacrificed their lives to make that thing happen. And that was not something ordinary. Their names are there. The final result of that deed might be very small, like Khudiram Bose tried, but he couldn't do something. But he got hanged for it. He lost his life at such a small age. That is not something very small. Not many can do that. So let us read about them. Let us give a part of our day to these people, and that would give us our own respect, I would say. So thank you so much, and please do read the book.